Voices from Pleiku, the men who served and fought there.
My name's John Trans. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I went to Pleiku Air Base in 1969 and returned home 1970.
What was your job while you were in Pleiku?
I was a firefighter, crash rescue firefighter.
Now, you are the first firefighter that I've had sit in that chair. I'm very excited to hear what was your life like and what was your job like?
Well, the job is your typical firefighter at certain times that you see in the city, you know, from structural fires. And depending on the day, I was on the air base putting out if there were any aircraft that came in hot and crashed or had to foam the runway and do that.
Now, when you foamed the runway, were they still using that little K-Max helicopter, the Pedro?
No, they used that for rescue, but we had a tanker that had bars that you would lay out left and right side, and then you would foam the runway that way. I believe it carried 2,000 gallons of water, not counting the foam that they would intermix with it when you went down and put it on the runway.
So can you tell me about an experience you had either with structure fire or with an aircraft?
Well, structure fires were plenty, you know, for us because of when we would get hit, you know, it'd be either an aircraft on fire or a structural fire. And it depends on the day, you know, there's certain times you were on the air base and then the next day you were on the base itself and you did the structure fires if it happened. But, surprisingly, there weren't as many as I thought there would be when I got there. And so they had you doing, you know, that there. And at times it became, I hate to say boring, but there were a few of us at that time volunteered with the Army to fly with the Army, what they called the headhunters. And you would go up and look for the enemy. And we did that for a couple of months because a guy that I worked with, he had a friend that was at camaraderie. And he said, anybody want to fly with the Army? So we did. And then the camp-based commander found out about it and came down to the firehouse and said, you can't do it no more. And the reason put was if you got shot, got shot down, they did not know where you were at and you would be considered AWOL. So we stopped doing that. But there were times that we had a fire in town and it was approximately 2:00 in the morning and I was working the base at that time and my sergeant came in and says, you're volunteering, get a driver, you're going into town. The security police are going to meet you at the gate and you're going to go in and help put the fire up, which is what we did. We got there and we were there approximately 15 to 20 minutes when we started getting shot at. And I looked at my driver. His name was Barney Alvarez. I won't forget the man. He was from Ohio. I says, where'd you put the rifles at? He looked at me and says, I thought you got them. So neither one of us brought our rifles with us. And I go, oh boy, you know, so I just said to him, I said, drop the hoses, which were meant to uncouple the hoses. We just left them there. Then when the police were able to get us out of there, we left. And unfortunately, we didn't get the fire put out. And
What kind of structure was it?
They were just a village. All, you know, the huts in the village were on fire. So we got back and the tanker had holes in it at that point. So that was incapacitated at that point and weren't able to use it. And then a couple of days later, we were going down to the air base part where the planes were kept, and we started getting hit with rockets. And so we jumped out the back of the truck to take, you know, cover. And a guy with us, he jumped on top of me and landed on my leg, which kind of like twisted it up. Put me in the hospital a couple of days, but I always say that's what saved my life because I was in a cast at that point, so I was no good on the fire truck, so they put me on the radio. And the night that I was on the radio, I would have been off duty and would have been back at the barracks. We got hit. And when I went back the next day, my bed was covered with nothing but concrete. So I always think, would I have been in bed at that time of the night? Would I have been hit with the concrete? So I always say that saved my life.
Now, what was your base hit with?
Mortars. You know, so I had to get a new bed.
Well, that's very fortunate.
Yeah.
One twist.
One thing that changes another. So I was in a cast for approximately a month and a half. I mean, it was a bad sprain more than anything else. And then I went right back to work.
So, what kind of aircraft were on the base when you were there?
A-1s and mainly A-1s, C-130s, 123s at times, and then helicopters. And C-47 that he was referring to.
Okay. was the base split between South Vietnamese and U.S. troops at that time? I know at one point we left, the U.S. left, and I think that was in the 70s.
Well, for the fire department itself, we were just all American troops.
I mean, did they have South Vietnamese aircraft there as well at that time, or was it just U.S.?
I would say all American.
Okay. All right. Can you tell me a little bit about more what you did during Vietnam or after Vietnam?
Well, after Vietnam, I went to Texas. And as soon as I got there, I put back to go to Vietnam again. And I was only there 6 months when they sent me to Korea. So I was in Korea instead. I asked them, how did I come to Korea? And they said, well, I volunteered for Korea too. And they said, nobody volunteers for here. So I thought I would go back to Vietnam first, but no, they sent me to Korea, and I was there for 13 months. And then when I was down there, my dad, who was a city police officer for Pittsburgh, sent me a letter stating that they were going to be hired on the fire department. And I knew I still had 9 months to go when I was getting out. So I went to the base commander and said, is there any chance of getting a 9-month early out? Which at that time there wasn't anything, as that there was a 6-month early out. And I told him why, that, I wasn't going to stay and make a career out of it like I thought it was initially. And I would like to get on the fire department. So he released me. And when I got back home, I went and applied for the fire department of the city of Pittsburgh, and I did 32 years for that.
Wow.
So it worked out very well.
Now, where were you in Korea exactly?
A-1 Air Base. And met a lot of good people there. And in Vietnam, today, I like to talk about a fellow by the name of Larry Fox. Mm-hmm. And we became best of friends in Pleiku. He was a firefighter. We became really good friends. And he lived in San Jose. So my wife and I would go out and see him and his wife. And while he was in Vietnam, he had his first son. So I still have his cigar to this day that he passed out. And today, unfortunately, a year ago, he passed away. And when I got home, I sent him a birthday card every year for his birthday. His birthday's June 19th. And he would always say to me, how do you remember my birthday? I don't remember yours. I just said, there's certain things you just remember. And then last year was the first year I had not sent him a birthday card. And when I got home from our reunion here, because last year was the first day of the reunion was September 15th, there was a message from his wife to call, and that was a little odd. And when I called, she proceeded to tell me he had passed away from Agent Orange. And so today I told my wife I got to call him. I get a little misty. Because like I said, over there, you wanted friends. I made friends, I think, with everybody. But him and I just became close. And when I went for R&R, I met the young lady who I was engaged to at the time in Hawaii, which was, from what I heard, most of the time you had to be married to go there. And I don't know if I fabricated that we were married, but we met there. And then the last day of our R&R, she proceeded to tell me, I'm leaving you. And I went, oh, crap. I said more than that, but it was French. And when I got back, I started talking to Larry about it. And, he kind of kept my head together. And one day we're sitting down the back steps of the barracks, and a guy come out and started ribbing me about it. And so I grabbed him and had him over the side of the banister, was going to drop him from the second story, and Larry talked me out of it. And, here I am married now for 52 years to the woman I met after I got back. So which everything works out for a good way and good reasons. But, he kept my head together. And so we kept in contact after that. I would go out there. Then we lost contact for a while, and he was from San Jose. And when my daughter a few years ago said, Dad, do you know Barb and Larry Fox? I go, yeah. She goes, he's trying to get hold of you. He moved to Idaho. When I went out there to see him, I go, this is a long ways from San Jose. You were a surfer. You fixed cars. Well, he still fixed cars, but he didn't surf anymore. And he worked for Hewlett Packard, and they sent him there, which was, he liked that. He liked it there. So go out there and see them. I was there 2 years ago, and we just sat there all night and talked like it was just like yesterday that we were in Vietnam together. And got to meet his son, who was born while he was there for the first time as an adult. I saw him when he was a kid, but as an adult, we got to sit and talk. And I said, I'm going to send you that cigar. So if you can't smoke it, it would just probably fall apart at the seams if you open up the wrapper, but I still have it.
You bring us back to, the camaraderie. What's it like for you when you come to a reunion like this?
I've met a lot of new friends. I mean, really, as Steve alluded to, your family, you're one big family. And I think that's why I like the fire department so much when I got out, because it was still the same thing. You're a family, and you do things together. picnics together, parties together. Here we sit and talk, and, you just laugh a lot, which is nice to have.
How was your transition leaving the military, going straight into the fire department? Did you find the structure that you had? Was it difficult? What was your last day in the military like when you came home?
Well, I partied a lot for a couple months. I partied hardy, and and I got it out of my system once I got hired, because I was only out of the service maybe 4 months when I got notified that I was going to be a firefighter. And the structure is the same. It's a pyramid, they call it, and it was the same. That going to the firehouse as in the military, you're making your bed. It's kind of funny to listen to the stories that everything is exactly the same, and the command structure is the same. From the captains, lieutenants on down to a firefighter. And so I was used to that, and that did not bother me. And when we were cleaning the rig the one day, and I'm cleaning places on there that you normally wouldn't even think about, and my chief, he's standing there and he looks, he goes, "I never seen anybody do that before." I'm cleaning the engine off because we had to clean the engines and all that stuff down. I said, that's just how I was started in the military. You clean the engines off, and we did. The fire trucks were some of the cleanest vehicles you ever want to see. And so it just carried over with me. And a couple of weeks ago, now my wife, she'll get up the same time I do, and she'll make the bed most of the time before I even get to it. But I pulled the corners tight and I flipped it under, and I said, "That's called a military corner. Bounce a quarter off it." You can see why I'm talking about that. And she just looks at me like, "There's something wrong with you." So it carried over to this day. And I'm not regimented, I don't think, but I do things a certain way that just carried over from that time. If you were told to do something on a fire department in the military, and you were told to do something at your job, then you just did it. You didn't ask questions. You just went and did it. And there's a reason for doing things, and you just did it. And then as you got older, you saw what those reasons were and why.
When you were in Vietnam, I had a gentleman make a statement once, and he said his experience in Vietnam was like looking down a straw. He said, you only saw what your particular field was supposed to see. You didn't see the whole picture. Did you ever associate with anybody else on the base, or just the fire department? Did you hang out with the ground crew or maintenance or anything like that?
Pretty much just the fire department men. But when we would go up to the NCO club and talk to different guys up there, you got to talk to them and you got to know them. And we had our own barbecue pit outside of barracks. We built it because that was civil engineering. So they built the barbecue pit there, and the officers were right across from us, like a walkway. They were there, and we would just sit and drink and party together. It was just like they were an officer and I was just an airman. We hung out together. And then Larry and I, we got a job. I'm trying to think of the gentleman's name. I want to say his last name was Fowler, but he got us a job at the officers club, where we would go up there at night and clean up. And we would sit there and talk to them. And then they would leave, and him and I would clean up the place and, scrub it, mop it, then go back to the firehouse, sleep, and get up and go to work. And that helped pass time away. And I remember one time we were getting ready to leave, and the phone rang, and it was the firehouse to call us because they knew where we were at. And they just said, just be careful walking back because there's a tiger loose on the base. And I know Steve talked about snakes, but there were tigers and snakes. And the snakes were one of the reasons I would not go into a bunker. When we first got there and we got hit, we ran for the bunker, but there was a cobra in front of the bunker entrance. And I don't like snakes. So I would not go in. And after that, I have a deep fear of snakes, always have. And the tiger didn't scare me so much. The snakes do. You can't see them. But the men and some of the nurses we got to talk to and so forth, they were very interesting. And even though we were airmen, they still talked to us like we were people. They didn't snub us or think we were, that they were high above us because they were officers. And they would just talk to you. And flying with the Army was really a nice experience. Got to do that, and the pilots and so forth that you would be there. You were just looking for anything down below, and then they would call for the aircraft to come in from that point on. And it was good. It was enjoyable.
Do you remember the unit, the Army unit that was doing the flying?
They were called the Headhunters. That's all I know. And they were Camaraderie. And And that's all. I got some pictures at home. I used to bring my book with me, but I've left that at home now. But yeah, that's all I can remember. I was sorry that they stopped us because I kind of enjoyed doing that. I always wanted to fly, and that's where my desire to go into the Air Force came in. When I was in, high school early on, I belonged to the Civil Air Patrol, and I thought I was going to make a career out of the Air Force. I always wanted to be a pilot. And I won't say I was the honor student, but I had great grades. And I worked at a restaurant, and the restaurant had all the politicians coming in there. Back at that time, there was a gentleman by the name of Congressman William Moorhead. And he asked me at the time, I was just a busboy, what were my plans for after high school? And I told him I wanted to go to the Air Force Academy. And he says, well, you need a sponsor. He goes, I'll be your sponsor for you. And I thought, this is great. Well, between that time and the time I got out of high school, two of my buddies got killed in Vietnam, and I kind of started drifting away. But that's what I think was one of the reasons when I got out of boot camp and went to Michigan, more than the snow. That was a push to get out of there. But I just started my two buddies. That's when I said I was going to Vietnam. And so I took some classes up in Michigan for a little bit. And then that was it. I never went back to college after that point. And I lost thought. So I apologize on that. I'm trying to think of the gentleman and everything, how I got into the Air Force, and that's where it was at. So when I went to boot camp, and I told him when I enlisted, I said, I want to be on airplanes. I like being around an airplane. He goes, don't worry, we'll get you on an aircraft. Don't worry about it. So when I went to boot camp and they're calling your names out, and they call my name out, and he goes, do you like to hunt? I go, no, I don't hunt. He goes, you fish? I go, I like to fish. He goes, you're going to K.I. Sawyer, Michigan. I said, okay. I said, what kind of aircraft am I going to be working on? He looked at the paperwork. He goes, you're going to be a firefighter. And I go, well, what do they do? I go, that's not what they told me. They told me I would be on an aircraft. He goes, well, understand this. You work for us now and you do what we tell you to do. And I thought, okay, but it was good. And the first lie they did to me, my best buddy I grew up with, we went on the buddy system. So we were supposed to be together. Well, when we got down to Texas, he went one way, I went the other way. And we never saw each other again until we both got out of service. So when I was going to Vietnam, he was stationed in Kansas. And he left to come home to see me. Well, I was done partying, so I left 3 days early. And when he got to my house, my mom and dad said he left already. So he was a little pissed off at me. So he ended up in Japan, so we got to talk to each other that way. He was in Japan and I was in Vietnam. So it was a good, when I say a good time, the 3.5 years I put in, or the 3.5 best years of my life in terms of making friends, no matter what base I went to, the men and women there were all the same. You all got along very well with each other. And our barracks in Michigan was all basically civil engineer. You just weren't all firefighters. Different people did different jobs that were stationed there. And it was good. It was interesting. And I think that's why I liked the fire department when I got out, because the men and women you worked with, you came from different walks of life, but you were there for one thing, to put out the fire, save lives. And I think that was the one thing I liked about being on the fire department. It did do that. I always enjoyed, I might remember my dad being a police officer, him talking about the people he helped and so forth, especially during the riots back in the 60s. And, that he wasn't just there for brute strength or anything like that, to help people. And the same with the fire department, the lives I like to pat my crew on the back that we saved and so forth, either out of fire or under medical circumstances, a heart attack. And I would see the one lady, she was in a nursing home, and we would get a call there, and she was always dressed to kill. Elderly people always seem to dress very well. Unlike us today, we wear shorts and all that good stuff. She always had pearls on. And we would go in and she would just point me out and say, that's the guy that saved my husband's life. And that was like rewarding itself. You did it to help people, but you didn't care if there was no reward other than satisfaction, basically, is what it came down to. And I did that for 32 years until I got hurt. And then I got hurt and went through a floor and had few fusions in my neck and my back, and my doctor says you can't go back. And that was probably the hardest part of my job, because I got on at 22 and went off at 54, and I still had a lot of years ahead of me. In my mind, I could still do what I wanted to do, but I was a captain at that time, and there weren't no jobs open for captain. It's a union, so the jobs that were there were desk jobs, and he would put me back on a desk job. But even though I had more time to say that Joe over here, they wouldn't put you in there because it was a union job. And I was on a list for the battalion chief. But the city came back and said, okay, he's either working or he's not working. And they didn't save jobs for you then. So I missed that job. So I would have been out of the physical aspect of doing firefighting. And I went back one day and they were hiring outside of the union for an assistant chief. So I was a captain. I went to school for fire department stuff. And then I figured my experience on the fire department in the Air Force would count for something because you knew about munitions, you knew about bombs, and we had fuel fires and fuel dump fires. And they didn't want nobody that was unionized. And I was part of the union and I did classes and stuff with them. And so they hired a new chief and I went down and talked to him. I says, my name's so-and-so. I'm a captain. I'm on disability, but I'd like to have an interview for the assistant chief's job. He never called me in. So I saw the gentleman they did hire, and I was down in the academy talking to one of the gentlemen I knew. He goes, can I help you? I said, no, I'm just here talking to the battalion chief. And then I'm leaving. I said, my name's so-and-so. I said, I just want to let you know, you took my job, and walked away. He looked at me like, we became friends after that. He got to know me a little bit, but that's me. I kind of try to keep a sense of humor no matter what I do. My wife will always say to you, or say to me, don't you have a serious answer in you? Nah, I said, that's boring. If everything to me was yes or no, I think life would be very boring. So she just wanted to know if I put my underwear on right. And I go, I don't know. I have to look at it first before I can tell you that question. So.
I do have a question for you.
Sure.
You brought up the riots in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And you were alive then. I'm curious, what is your point? What do you see now compared to the 60s? Is it similar?
Well, it was over basically the same thing, killing of Martin Luther King and so forth like that, and the riots were there, and I was born in what they call the Hill District back home in Pittsburgh, and that's where, predominantly the black people live. And back then it was more mixed, I think. But my dad, he taught us right from wrong, treat people the way you want to be treated, always did, and that's on me, my brother and two sisters. We were brought up, and that's why I like the service. I mean, it wasn't, I won't say the 60s, there weren't some prejudices going on. I mean, that's life, unfortunately, and that's today too. But that was never part of my thing. So I knew my dad taught me right. And I would come home from grade school, and my dad and my mom would be sitting in the kitchen with the garbage men back then, and having lunch. And they'd be laughing up a storm, having a beer. And I just thought, that's how life has to be. You just have to enjoy it. So my dad, even though he was on the police department in the riots, it didn't change his view of people. I think he had a good prospect of life and how you're supposed to do it. And I like to think that's how I took it with me. I think that's how I raised my children to be the same way. And I think that's why my wife and I get along so well, because we do respect everybody that walks in front of us. And my dad and mom taught me that, and his perspective from being a police officer. He saw good and bad. There was some hardened criminals back in the 60s. In fact, where we were living at after that, from the Hill District, right below our house was the mob. And my dad would point out, that's so-and-so, that's so-and-so, and he knew every one of them by name. But, and the restaurant I worked at was owned and operated by the mob. I don't know if that's why there were so many politicians that were there. But, that's who ran it. And that was the only non-Italian working there. And that came because the gentleman below us, I could say his last name, Mr. Donardo, was really a great guy. I hung around with his kids. And we were bus boys there at the same time. We all got along very well together. And I didn't look at him as being knowing what I know now about the mob, because I don't know if that word's still proper, but that's what was called in the 60s, and, the daughters and I, we all went to hops, as they called it, dances together, and hung around together. And we just had a good time together. But, my mom and dad were the reasons that I became who I was, I think.
My last question.
Yes.
With today's youth, would you recommend them joining the military? What is your...
I always thought the military was a straight thing. I really do. It taught you a lot of discipline. It taught you right from wrong. It taught you how to take orders. And I seen a lot of that at the end of my fire career. You would get more young people who weren't in the military and thought they knew more than what the people who had experience knew, and wanted to tell you what to do instead of you telling them, hey, do it this way, And I think the military is a good thing. I really do. And I just think it helps you become an adult. younger at 18, then you have to wait till you're in your 20s, you know. And I'm not saying I knew everything after becoming out of the service, because I still think I'm learning today. But I do think if they would just go back to that and bring people into the military, they would see you get a career out of it. You know, you got so many different things to learn today with the AI technology and so forth that, you know, and that's where they're headed for. And it's free schooling. I mean, I went to school when I got out of the service, and it was paid for by Uncle Sam. So, yeah, I think it's a good thing.
Well, thank you so much. Do you have anything else that you'd like to say today, Steve? Or Johnson, sorry.
I wish I was 19 again and back with my buddies, but I'm here with them I think I'm the youngest one here, to be honest with you. I'm 75, and I sit down and I'm on the board at my VFW, and I'm still the youngest person there. We're all Vietnam veterans. Unfortunately, we can't get no young veterans to want to step up and do what we are doing. We've been doing it for years. I've belonged to my VFW since 72, and to see the young guys not wanting to get involved. They want the benefits, which we get for them, but they don't want to get involved. And we tell them when we're gone, so will the VFW. You know, won't be here for you anymore. But yeah, I wish more young guys would get involved with it, you know.
I have a friend, she was a Black Hawk pilot. Her father was a warrant officer in Vietnam, Huey's, and then both of his twin daughters went and became Black Hawk pilots, and she's now involved. The one is involved very heavily with the VFW in Savannah. So you're starting to see some of that come around.
Yeah.
Where
I think outside of the city, more VFWs have the younger guys. Mm-hmm. Inside of the city, I don't know if there's just so many things for them to do that they don't get involved. But outside of the city, there's only certain places you can go to. I mean, we do have the American Legion. We do have the VFWs. We have the 3 hospitals and so forth like that they can go on their own and get it. But we have a great VA rep who will almost guarantee you benefits if you have them come, and she will know how to get them for you. So that's a good thing to have. And my wife's involved with the VFW. My daughter, they're both on the auxiliary. Used to be able to call it the ladies auxiliary. If you go to a meeting and you say ladies auxiliary, you better open up your wallet because you're paying a $5 fine. And so she's president. My daughter's vice president. We just went to a suicide walk last week for veterans. And it's sad to see how many young faces are there on that walk of the people who have committed suicide that were military.
Was suicide as prevalent after Vietnam as you see today?
More by drugs, I think. Yeah, I had a good friend whose brother, he was a Vietnam veteran, and he just got hooked on drugs over there, never did it before he went. Came back, and they found him in his mom's backyard. He was a Marine, and, you know, he saw a lot more than I can ever say I ever saw, you know, and it got the best of him. But now today, a good friend of ours down the VFW, their daughter and my daughter both knew each other, and she was going to the VA. She had 12 years in the Army and went and saw a psychiatrist, went out to the parking lot and killed herself after she talked to him. So, yeah, there's just so many young ones. I'm not sure why. I don't know. I mean, because the men and women in our time saw a lot themselves. I mean, you know, you seen on the air base the people being put on the aircraft that were wounded in some sense or form. You saw the body bags being loaded onto the planes. And I don't know how much difference there is because I was never in combat. You know, the one incident down in town, you know, that was totally separate. Wasn't no hand-to-hand or anything like that. And I don't know what they see. I can never say, oh, I know what you're going through, because you don't unless you do it. You know, you feel it. You can feel their pain because of what they're going through. A good friend of mine on the fire department, to this day, he still has nightmares. You know, he was a tunnel rat over there, and I can't imagine what that would be like. You know, that you're going, hey, I read books a lot now. I'm kind of like my dad in that respect. I like to read history and so forth, and to read the books on him. I believe the guy's name was O'Brien, and he wrote a lot of books and talking about how the sergeant would say, look at you, says, okay, you're going in because you're the smallest one. And Chester, yeah, he's only 5'4", but he was a Marine, and that's what he did. And we were over his house the one night, and he's middle of the night, he's screaming. And he was back in that foxhole, or not in that foxhole, but that tunnel. And so I can't imagine what they went through. I really can't. I can never say I do. Fire department, I can say I saw my amount of death on that. And I don't know if that equates to what they went through, because usually when you're on a fire department, you either get there where it's too late, or you're trying to get them out, you get them out, but then they're past that point of returning. Where there, you're fighting for your own life. You know, here you're trying to save a life. You're fighting for your own life at that point, or with your buddies. You know, so. But it was 3.5 good years of my life I would never trade for anything. I want to give it up for nothing. Not the money in the world can buy you the friendship and the life excursions, if that's the word. I don't know if there are episodes of life that you learn that like you can buy with money. You know, you just can't do it.
Well, John, thank you so much.
Oh.
I really appreciate you taking the time, and I hope you have a wonderful reunion.
I will. The men and women here, you can't not but have a good time. The only thing that was funny was last year we're sitting around the table. I think it was like 9:45 at night. There was only a couple of us, and one guy goes, "Looky here, they're all in bed. They must be getting old." But, you know, when you go all day, like yesterday, me and the wife were walking around a lot, and the heat, you know, and you get a little bit tireder, a little bit more quicker, and nothing like soaking your feet and laying in bed and just waking up the next day and get started all over again. So she's probably wondering. I didn't tell her I was coming down here, so she went upstairs to get something. She's probably going, "Where is he at?" You know. So if I go out there, she's probably with the police. That's him. But thank you for doing this. We do appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
No, you're welcome.